Okay? Well, I'm going to go, this is a brand new subject, and it has to do with history. We, in order to understand our situation here in the world, how we got to this place and what happened and everything, we need to look into our past and begin to understand the situation of the past. It's really important. A lot of times people tend to think that, well, we don't really need to know that. We know where we are now, and we just need to go forward. But that is not the nature of life. When we're going to look at something called the Fibonacci series a little later. It's a series that goes 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, and it keeps going. And all it is just, if you take 3 segments of it, 3, 5, and 8, it's just you're adding 3 to 5 and you get 8, and 8, 5 and 8 you get 13, and 8 and 13 you get 21, and 13, 21, you get 34. It's an adding. This particular series is called the Fibonacci or Fibonacci series, and it is linked to many different aspects of organic chemistry and organic life. And specifically to one of them, of the areas, is plant life. And plants, when they grow, they tend to grow according to this particular series. In other words, the plant will grow 1 leaf, and then it'll grow 1 more, and then it'll come out with 2, and then 3, and then 5, and then 8. This is one of the series that is used over and over and over again. And the little plant, it needs to be able to have a pattern to know where to go. And so the plant, when it's sitting here with 5 leaves, all it has to do is look into its past to see that it grew 3. Combine that with where it is, and it now knows where to go. It knows that 8 is the amount. When it gets to 8, it looks into its past and sees that it's 5 and knows that 13 is the place to go. And in the same way, we need to, time is also divided into this 3-ness. Maybe I should just, well, I'll finish this statement and go back to the other one. Time, we have this past, present, and this future. And in order for us to know where the proper place for us to be or what to do in the future, we have to combine our present with our past. If we don't know what our past is, we're lost. Absolutely lost. No matter what you think of yourself or where you're going, you don't know where you're going. You don't have a future. A future could be anything. You don't know where it goes. And so we need to know what happened and what got us to where we are in order to proceed. And just to take this one step further, we live in what is often called good and evil consciousness and sometimes called polarity consciousness. You know, where things are good and bad and black and white, etc. But there is no such thing as this. You need to see this point real quickly. There is no polarity consciousness. There's no polarity anything. No matter what polarity you think of, you're going to realize that there is a third component. If you think of the earth and the sun, or male and female, or black and white, or up and down, or hot and cold, with the earth and the sun, there's going to be the moon. With male and female, there's going to be the child. With black and white, there's going to be gray. With up and down, there's the middle. With what was the other? Hot and cold, there's going to be warm. No matter what the polarity is, there's always this thing in the middle. There's 3 parts. The entire fabric of the universe is made of proton, electron, and neutron. And it's 3-ness. Our time is past, present, and future. Our space is the XYZ axis. It's the nature of this particular level of consciousness. This is how we interpret our reality. There's other ways to interpret it, but this is the way we interpret it. Every mathematical sequence in existence, except for one, which is the golden mean, which created all the other ones, you only need 3 components in it to know the entire sequence. And so we live in a tri-world, the Holy Trinity. And so we need to know we have to know two of the components to know what the other one is. You could do it the other way around. You could subtract this one from this one. You could, if you knew your future, you could know what your past was. You could subtract your present from your future, and you'd know where you've been. And so, for this reason, I have been asked to discuss history for about 2 hours or something like that, for a long period of time. And so, here we go. Now, I'm going to combine, first of all, I used to give this history lesson strictly from Thoth's point of view, who is someone who's been around here for a long time. However, recently, another man who I haven't even met yet, Zecharia Sitchin, I was introduced to his books and found out that they dovetailed with what Thoth was saying so closely that I wanted to use both of them. Though some of the things that Thoth is saying is beyond what Zecharia Sitchin is saying from interpreting the records. And you understand what I mean by beyond in just a moment. Thoth just started saying, and this I've got this on record going back 7.5 years. Thoth just says, well, there were these giants on the world. And that's where he starts out. He says there was these giants here. He didn't say where they came from or who they were or what they were. He just said there were these giants. It isn't just Thoth who says that. If you take the Bible and you go into Genesis and you go to chapter 6, which is a very interesting chapter, it says, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, and that the sons of God, this is plural, people, sons of God, saw the daughters of men, and that they were fair, and they took them wives of all of which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man. This is another statement people have wondered about. For that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120. And then number 4 it says, and there were giants in the earth in those days. And also, after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them, and the same became mighty men, which were of old men of renown. Who are these sons of God? And, plural. And this is not talking about a single one. And this is talking about God being made of flesh, and that they were giants. Well, according to the Zecharia Sitchin, who's read his works? Okay, we've got just a few people. I really recommend you do this. It's on the reading list. After you see this workshop, you won't be able to put his books down, I'll tell you. He's just reading the clay tablets. He's just saying what they say. And they give a story that is rather remarkable. For number one, supposedly Moses wrote Genesis in about 1250 BC. I think that was approximately time. And but Genesis is written down in the Sumerian records 2,300 years before that time, word for word. Coming right down to Adam and Eve and giving the names of their sons and daughters and and all the way down through there. The whole thing. 2,300 years before Moses even lived, or maybe not quite that long before he lived. It was written down in the Sumerian tablets. And it talks about this rather incredible time when, according to the tablets, there's another planet in our solar system, which NASA has now located, absolutely. The satellite direction knows exactly where it is. The planet's there. It's been scientifically determined. But they said that there was another planet, and that the planet went in retrograde relative to the rest of the planets. As they were all moving around this way, this one's coming in the other way. And that it came in every approximately 3,600 years. And just missed it. And according to that, there was this planet called Tiamat, which was this huge planet that had moons around it. And one day, this other planet, which they give the name Murdoch, at least the Babylonians did, and what did the Anunnaki call it? Nibiru. And Nibiru came in one time very close to Tiamat, and one of the moons of Nibiru struck Tiamat and shattered it in half, and the big half came to be known as Earth. And the little half broke into 1,000,000 pieces and became known as the Hammered Bracelet, which is the asteroid belt that stretches around between Mars and Jupiter, I think it is. And that was a long, 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 long time ago. But according to the Sumerian records, there's people on this planet that are pretty far along, advanced. And about 400 and something thousand, I think it was 430, 40, 50,000 years ago, they decided to come to Earth. And they came to Earth, according to the records, because they were having a problem with their atmosphere, just like we are. They are way out in space and need the greenhouse effect to reflect the light back on and keep them warm. And they were losing their heat, and so they decided that the best thing for them would be to put gold dust into their atmosphere to reflect the heat back. That was the decision that was made. And so they came to Earth to get this gold. I'm not making this up. This is in, this is in right in the records, along with Genesis that you could read about Adam and Eve. And they came here to get the gold, and they came in with 12 people who were their leaders, and I think it was 400 to 600 other people who were the workers. And so for about 200 and something thousand years, which and I differ slightly with this figure with Zechariah. He's calculating this thing. Anyway, for a certain length of time, they worked the planet Earth getting this gold, and they weren't that far along technologically. They used rocket ships to get back and forth. We're not talking about high-tech vehicles here, and so they had to wait till Marduk came around, so it was into the atmosphere closer, and then they would transfer all the gold up to it and then come back down again. They had to wait another 3,600 years before they could put the gold back onto it again. And these people had very, very, very long lifespans, huge lifespans compared to what we are. And so here's these 600 people digging gold for 100,000. According to him, it was about 100,000 something years, 200,000 years. It would have been longer according to Thoth, a little bit. They're within 100,000 years of each other. So, and then one day there was this revolt where the workers just said, "I'm not going to dig gold anymore. I'm tired of it." Darn stuff, I've had it. And they just wouldn't dig gold anymore. And so the people decided that, the leaders, the 12 leaders, decided, well, they would do something. They thought about it, and they decided what they'd do is they'd make a sub-race. And the sub-race would dig the gold for them. And the sub-race would dig the gold for them. The sub-race is us, according to them. That they created this race from clay and blood and sperm from the young Anunnaki, which are the people that live on there, and that's what it says right in there. And then and they used, you can see them with test tube flasks pouring stuff and all this thing. It's written right on the record. You can see it, where they did all these things and created this whole race, which we are capable of doing right now. We could create a new race. If this came out 100 years ago, that would be like science fiction, but we could do everything that they're talking about right now. We are just about ready to map all the genes on the DNA molecule, all 100,000 of them, and know every single one of them by name and location and what they do. We're rapidly unfolding that. Another 2, 3, 4 years, and we'll have it all figured out. And we could create any kind of race you want. You name it. You can just map out what you want. We could create a whole different kind of person, superior race, anything you want. And so imagine if we were 400,000 years farther down the line. What if we were 1 million years or 10 million years further down the line? What we could do. Anyway, according to this, they created a new race using that and using the most advanced race that was on the Earth. That's real interesting because when you go to the most advanced race, which is what, the Cro-Magnon, is that what it is? And then suddenly jumps to the Homo sapien. There's this, the missing link. Nobody knows how we got from here to here. It isn't possible. There's no way. We can't see the evolutionary jump. We don't know what happened. According to Sumerian records, it's because an outside alien race came in here and messed with us and created this jump up to where we are right now. And according to Thoth, there were 7 of them that came together. Again, I got this back 7 years earlier. 7 people came together. See, everything that happens on a 3rd dimensional level has a 4th dimensional counterpart, and higher, or very often higher. And there's much more involved to just creating a race than just throwing a bunch of chemicals together. There are other things, there are grids that have to be formed, and there's a lot of stuff that has to take place. It is not as simple as it may seem. And according to Thoth, on a 4th dimensional level, there were 7 of the giants that came together and dropped their bodies and merged themselves into spheres of light, and that these formed the flower of life pattern, and that a flame appeared, which was about 4 feet tall, a blue-white flame, which was pure prana, which is life force energy, which became the ovum, the female ovum, and then that was put into the halls of Amente, which is a dimensional fold in space that the Egyptians talk about, which is really the womb of the Earth, which is where the starseed and all the 500 million years of races have been created from. This is a whole other subject. This halls of Mente is usually out beyond the bubble. There's a membrane outside the Earth we don't know about, which is 440,000 miles out, and on the other side of that is usually where the halls of Mente is located. It's a dimensional fold time that moves with the Earth, but on 1 overtone higher than the Earth. So it's not visible to the Earth, but it's very accessible. And it's folded into the shape, outside of it anyway, it's folded into the shape of a womb. And anyway, the flame was placed there. And as soon as it was placed there, according to Thoth, there was a family, 32 members of both 16 males and 16 females from the star Sirius, who were the male outside, the sperm that comes from outside the system, that came from the alien aspect that came from outside the system to come in and be the daddy. And it was all prearranged and ordained on all kinds of levels. And so they came from outside the system. The Anunnaki put flame inside the system, put it into the womb of the Earth, and the Syrian race came in. These are like 10 to 16 foot high beings also. Both the Anunnaki and the Syrians were these giants, these tall people. And on very high level of consciousness, whatever they're in the part where they think an orange they could have one in their hand and peel it, they thought that there were 32 slabs of rose quartz granite laying there around the flame, and there was. And they laid down male, female around this flame and merged or conceived with the flame, the ovum. For 2,000 years they merged with this. You see, in human terms, birth takes so long and conception takes so long, and the whole process is 9 months, but on a planetary level, it's much longer. It's the same process, just much longer. And so they laid there for 2,000 years conceiving until the first one was created. And meanwhile, on the 3rd dimensional level, according to the Sumerian records, they were doing the flask tubes and creating the proper one. And then what do? They bring 7 females together. It's right there in the records. 7 females were brought in, and the ovums which were created were placed into the wombs of these 7 females, which then gave birth to these 7 human babies, both male and female babies. Only the babies were sterile and could not procreate. And you can see them. Here's these big, tall Anunnaki sitting there with these little, tiny, naked humans, and they're holding them in their hands. That if they stood up, the humans would be like about that high. And here's these big, huge, tall, 10 to 16 foot tall Anunnaki that are doing this. And it's right on the record. You can see it for yourself. And because a lot of this is not just words, but it's also visual drawings and stuff that they put on there. And so so our purpose, according to the Sumerians, was to dig gold. That's why we were created. Then you go back to the actual physical archaeological records, and you go back first let me throw another side trip in here. We had a theory called the Eve's theory, where they had checked the DNA and a particular aspect of DNA and found an overlapping process where they were able to trace back through all the races of the world back to a single human being, which was this black female in this very specific valley in southeastern Africa. Now, some people are beginning to debate that theory now, but still, the evidence is incredible. Who knows about this and what I'm talking about? Just a few people. You'll see it's at the moment being debated, but for a while it was accepted, and now they're still debating it. But it's real interesting to me on one point here is that the very valley that they picked happened to be the one, according to Sumerian records, where it all began. Same place. And if you go into that very valley, I don't remember the name of it right now, but it's recorded in both the books and in that other thing. You go into that valley, they have found gold mines there. Ancient gold mines going back 100,000 years with Homo sapien bones in and around the gold mine. Homo sapiens mining gold at least 100,000 years ago. And what the heck are we hairy barbarians mining gold for? It's a soft metal. It isn't something that we can use to make tools with or anything else like that. What's it for? What good is gold to a primitive people? These gold mines, by the way, they found them all the way from 100,000 years. They found 80, 60, and as early as only 20,000 years ago, we were still mining gold. Only 20,000 years ago. Still doing it. Yeah, probably. You got to realize these ice ages are coming and going all the time. The whole planet doesn't go over with ice. Basically, you might say the ice caps recede further down. The centers of the Earth is still not frozen over, but very cold compared to normal. We've survived this for millions of years. We've managed to survive these ice ages one after another for millions of years. So anyway, when you look at everything, you start throwing in that whole thing of the ice ages going on, it makes stuff even more complex. So, if this is true, I mean, it's outrageous. We don't want to think that we're made to be slaves to dig gold. We want to see us as more noble than that. But who knows? This is what the most ancient records in the world have to say about ourselves. And these are not just a few isolated records we're talking about. 100,000 records that are being found. All the ancient cities that were in the Bible, which they thought for a long time were myth, have now all been uncovered. And they now know where all the ancient Sumerian cities are, which run through southern Iraq. Babylonians in southern Iraq. All these ancient ones, they've all discovered where they all are, and they're finding them, and they're getting all the records, and they're beginning to dig up all this ancient stuff. It's no longer just myth anymore. And So, now, according to the Sumerian records, two of these brothers, Anunnaki and one of the other ones I can't remember. The major cities of the Sumerian cities ran up through the Middle East, up in there, which was not a desert, but was a dense jungle, because the whole climate was different. And they had these incredible, beautiful cities there, with these huge gardens that surrounded in and around these cities, and which took a lot of work. And so, according to Sumerian records, a great deal of the gold miner workers were brought up to these gardens to work the gardens. And it was there that one day, Anunnaki, whose name means snake, told Adam and Eve, according to the Sumerian records, to eat of this tree. What the tree would do, the tree of good and evil would do, is that it would make them procreate. They'd be able to have babies if they ate of this tree. And so they did it according to this. And then Anil's brother came in, who was the other one. And remember, it says right in the Bible, he's walking through the garden. This is God walking through the garden. And he comes across, and they were hiding from him. And he had to call for them. And when they came out, I mean, he had no supernatural powers or anything like that. He saw them that they were naked and saw that they were hiding, and then he realized that what they had done, that they had eaten from the tree. And this was a really gentle person. He did not kill them. He just made them leave, and he monitored them and watched them. And they began to multiply, and he recorded all their names and who they were, and we kept track of all that, which is all written down for a long time. And but then when you start going out from there and you start studying what happened after that, this is where I'm going to start taking us out further. There's some important points in all of this that need to be brought forth. So we have two kinds of races going on here. We have the one that they were working the mines, which were sterile. The only way they could make more of those babies is to put the ovum inside the uterus of one of the female Anunnaki, and for her to give birth to this little. That was the only way they could get more of them. And so they kept doing that until they got what they wanted. And I guess if one of them died, they'd just make more of them. We also then had this other race that was separate from us, that could procreate on its own, which they kept watching. And from there you see many, many travels around. Now, according to Thoth, when he says it 7 years ago, the first human beings came out on an island just to the west of Africa, southern Africa. When he first told me this, it all sounded kind of strange, because I hadn't read any of this stuff about Africa and the Sumerian records, because I always thought his Garden of Eden as being up, more in where, we generally think about it. But he was saying, no, the original place was to the west of Africa on this very large island, and that's where the first human beings came out onto the surface. And the name of that island is consistent throughout the African creation stories, and it's called Gondwana land. And you can read the creation stories, which I've done. I went out and read a whole bunch of these along all the western shores of Africa. They all have different ideas about how creation took place, but they all consistently say that we came from an island to the west called Gondwana land. They all say that. Every one of them I read anyway, though they have real different ideas about the rest of it. And Thoth says that's where we started out, which is this place down in here. It was a large, it could almost be a continent. And it could have been touching here, or it may have been partly touching and partly separated. I don't know. When he gave me all of this like that, and that was the one piece that I never got clear in my mind. Though from then on in I got it pretty clear. And I'm still not really sure. I don't think it was this big. Smaller. And I remember I drew this drawing a long time ago. And that they basically isolated us for a long time until we got to a certain level of development. And then they took us into southeastern Africa and began working the mines. And then from there up into the area of Iraq and up in there. And then from there, I believe that it was Cain who went into the Americas, what we now call South America, and in there. And but there was another aspect of this, the part that came out of the Adam and Eve part, which evidently was the part that was allowed to proceed after this went down. There was a huge... we stayed in here for a long period of time, and I don't really know what it was. We're talking about tens of thousands of years. Until finally, there was a point here when we had a pole shift, and this whole aspect sank and left, and it was gone. Again, I'm not real clear on the details of all of this, but one way or another, the survivors of Adam and Eve up in here made their way over to this area over in here into the Pacific. Exactly how that, and they, according to Thoth, this area here, when it went down, this area came up. They were simultaneously on the same moment when this took place. And there was, and whether or not the Anunnaki deliberately brought them over to here, which may be part of what happened, I don't know. I don't have Thoth here to ask these questions anymore, so I don't have the ability to find out these kind of details. How they got there, what happened, I don't know. But at one point or another, they got over to here. And now we're now talking about the procreation aspect, the Adam and Eve aspect, not the other part of us, which is at this point completely gone. Because when they stopped and they died, there's nobody to replace them. That was it. They were gone. They were all sterile. And so at one point we began in this area here, which we now call Lemuria. However, Lemuria was, to us in the 20th century, we tend to think of it as kind of a myth or something that maybe kind of happened or didn't happen. But there was a time in about 1910, 11, 12, and there, 1915, when we began to rapidly waken up. What the process that's now going on right now started then. And then in 1914, World War I came along and just blew us right out of the water. And it wasn't until the 60s that we began to waken up again. But during that time of the early 1900s, we had proof that Lemuria was there. And at this point, we've completely forgotten the proof that we had. There was people like James Churchward and Laplosion, a Frenchman, who were very famous in tracking. They were in the papers all the time talking about Lemuria and Atlantis. And the possibilities of all of this. And Churchward wrote several books on it, so both of them did, actually. And one of the subjects, there was a book written called Atlantis, the Mother of Empires. I think it was about 1913, somewhere back in there. It's an old book and that I got my hands on. And there was some information in that book that was very, very amazing that they had that information. Back as far as that time, they had discovered near the area of Easter Island that there were these coral rings that extended out into the Pacific Ocean as far as they could determine going out in there. The coral rings were unusual in the sense that coral can only grow 150 feet below the surface of the water. These rings were 1,800 feet deep, meaning that the island had to be above the water and slowly come down, very slowly, so that the coral can continue to form, and yet you can see how slow that would have to be for the coral to form, and yet for it to continue and not die, and then end up being 1,800 feet deep. And so they saw these things going off in there, and then at the same time, they had discovered that the fauna and the flora that stretch from Easter Island all the way up, there's a series of islands that goes up from Easter Island all the way through the Tahitian Islands, all the way up to the Hawaiian Islands. And the fauna and the flora on all just that chain of islands that stretches through there is all the same. It's identical. There's the same plants, the same trees, the same bugs, the same bacteria, same everything else like that. And there's no way that could have taken place unless there had been a landmass much closer stretched in there. So the understanding of that, along with all these coral rings that were stretched under there that were on the floor, they surmised that there had to be a continent. Though the continent was not a physical continent, according to Thoth, it was a series of islands, lots and lots and lots of islands, forming what would be like a landmass, but with no solid, total, complete length. There was just thousands and thousands of islands that stretched down there. That outer length running from basically from Kauai all the way down to Easter Island was the western shores of Lemuria, and the rest of it all went under. And we began to progress in that spot to a level that we are just now beginning to return to. We progressed to a very, very high level of technology, a different kind of technology, totally unheard of and unknown these days. It was a right brain technology, female, based upon psychotronics and these kinds of things that we are just beginning to become a little aware of, only they had developed that to the level that we have developed our left brain logical technology. And they were able to do, you can do anything from that aspect as you will, from the female aspect as well as you can from there. And we were becoming a female. We were becoming, an evolutionary pattern has to become either male or female, and we were becoming a young female. By the time that Lemuria was finished, before it went down, we were equivalent to about a 12-year-old girl. And everything was going very well. And the Syrians who monitored all of this and have remained, they're immortal, they remained alive during this whole time watching it. Everything was going just great and fine. And the Anunnaki also were not going to mess with us. Everything was going just great and fine. There was no problems. It was looking really, really, really good. And then something happened that we have never quite survived from. We've never come out of it. And we're going to have to go in about 5 minutes to lunch, but when we get back, I'll tell you what happened. And it's the most important part. It's what happened when we shifted from there to Atlantis. Some things took place that changed the course of our evolutionary pattern. There is one more bit of information I need to put out, and that is, this is the part that Zecharia Sitchin did not understand. When Enlil came into the planet from the 13th, from the 12th planet, which is really the 10th planet, we're counting the sun and the moon in that. When he came into the oceans. He landed in the oceans. And he spent a great deal of time in the oceans. And when he came out of the oceans, he was half fish and half man. And then, suddenly, he becomes this man. But the original thing show him coming out of the water with, like a mermaid or a merman going out of there. And Zecharia never understood what that was. But what was going on was the race. We had a race here, a very conscious race. More conscious than they were. And as the dolphins and the whales. The dolphins have been here for a minimum of 35 million years, I think is the minimum. The whales go back 500 million years to the very beginning of the memory. They hold the memory of the Earth. And I don't remember exactly. Elizabeth, do you remember how long the dolphins have been here?
Just as what you said.
35 million? Yeah, I think that's right. So they were here long before the Anunnaki came here, which was only 400,000 or so, and they were on the same, really a higher level of consciousness. Well, what I haven't explained all of this is that the dolphins have this connection back to Sirius, and on Sirius, again, not to a star, but to Sirius B, the third planet out, there's this planet which is almost pure water with a little tiny bit of land mass. There's a land, and I've been there. I know this place real well. There's a land mass there about the size of California, and there's a land mass there about the size of Australia. That's it. There's no more land. There might be a speck or two somewhere, but there's no more land up anywhere. And almost the whole planet is cetacean, except for a few humanoid beings, which you're going to look and see what they look like here in a little bit. They look very human-like, and they are being phased out. They are slowly turning into dolphins, and I haven't got to the place where I explain why they're doing that. But when they're on Earth, they're primarily the dolphin aspect. And Neil, when he came in, he went to the consciousness of the planet. He went to the dolphins, or perhaps the whales and the dolphins. And there was a direct communication first with that before they came out. It had to take place. And when the Anunnaki began to create our race, it was only natural for them to ask the assistance of the Sumerians, because when you're talking, the Syrians rather, because that's what you're talking about. When you're talking about a dolphin, you're talking about a Syrian being. It's an extraterrestrial race that's been here for a long time, so it's now a terrestrial race, but its original source is off-planet, from Sirius. Yeah.
Whatever happened to the giants?
The original 32 members of the Syrian race are still here, and a certain number of the Anunnaki are also still here, though they can't, because of our level of awareness where we are right now, they can't make themselves directly known, though they did in the past, and I'll show you, they did in the time of Egypt, only for a short time. And they will again. We will see them, for sure. And it's one guarantee I can give you. We will see them again, for sure. Yeah. What? Ra is one of the original Atlanteans, and who started Egypt. And he worked with Thoth and some of those other ones, but that's not...
Are some of these Syrians who might still be on our planet living in the ocean, like on a colony of Oceania, perhaps?
Well, they have the ability to do things that we would say are impossible. They can live underwater, or they can live they don't need air like we need air, because they live on prana, and prana's everywhere. You could have them in a totally vacant, vacuumed out room, and they can do just fine without any air whatsoever. But this particular group, who has been connected to us very strongly, and has been, they have a very specific place on the surface of the earth, inside the earth, where they live, and where the Anunnaki, what their relationship is and where they are, I don't really know that one, though I believe they're still here. When we get into the more present-day time, you'll understand what's going on, and they're still here, though there never has been very many of them here. There's only about 612 maximum.
It seems like genetically engineered, interplanetary, genetically engineered slave labor would be a big cosmic no-no on the level of violation of free will and that sort of thing. how does that fit in with cosmic law? And also, why would beings who are advanced enough to directly manifest things not simply be able to manifest the goal that they required?
The Anunnaki were not advanced enough to be able to do that. They were not, like I said, they were in rocket ships. You could see their ships with flames coming out the back. That's on the Sumerian records. And so these are people that are not a whole lot evolved much further than where we are right now. And though they have began to reach up into the higher levels of awareness, you can tell that by their size, which we'll talk about size later. But they are, our mommy aspect was a rather low level of life. Our daddy was a much more advanced level of life, far more advanced than the mommy in terms of consciousness. But the one thing you must realize is that both of these races were a product of the Lucifer rebellion, and would freely break laws.
And finally, connected with that, what kind of soul would choose to inhabit a body that was designed as slave labor, given the idea that they would know what their prospects were in doing that?
Well, we're one. We did it, you and I did it. Things aren't always what they appear to be, and that's kind of an ego thought in a way. From a higher level, if there's an ultimate reason beyond all of it down there, there might be a reason. We have obviously taken from what's been slave labor, turned it around, brought it in another direction, and now we're about to bring it into another direction, even beyond what the Lucifer rebellion ever dreamed of. And so, I don't know. What's happening here is pretty remarkable when you see the whole level of what's going on, which I guess most of you have. This is a little more than what the original intent ever was. But the beings that were made to do gold, to slave for gold, realized that as soon as the Anunnaki saw that we had eaten of the tree, they didn't have us do gold anymore. They had us go live on our own and do our own, and okay, you're out of this thing now. Go over there and start your own thing. And they just allowed us to keep going. Though they did try to kill us, remember, if you read the Sitchin books, according to the records, they knew that the earth was going to be destroyed by water, by flood. They knew quite a while in advance. And the plan was, according to the Sumerian records, was to get off the surface in their ships and allow us to be annihilated. And it was Enlil again, if I remember right, who went to Moses, and he was sworn not to tell. What? Enki? That's what I'm thinking of. It was Enki. It was Enki again who was sworn not to tell that this was going to happen. So what he did is he didn't tell him directly. He went and told the wall. But he knew that Moses was on the other side of the wall. Moses? Noah. Noah was on the other side of the wall. And so he violated basically the trust that they would not tell. He told Noah and prepared Noah. When the Anunnaki went up into space, and they were all crammed in their ships because they didn't really have enough ships for all these people to get in there. They were all crammed in there. And they were orbiting around the Earth, and they saw the incredible destruction that was happening. They all began to cry and began to realize how sad it was, and that they didn't really want us to die. And that's when they found out that Noah survived. And they were actually happy that Noah had survived this one, at least according to the records. But we have an interesting race that we've got here, and so we are the product and development of the Lucifer rebellion all the way through from beginning to end, and there's a lot of things that are going on in the universe that are not according to galactic law, And though this may have been allowed by galactic law, it could have been, depending, I don't know if they had permission to start this or not. Those never told them. And it's not in the Sumerian records. They don't talk about the higher dimensional levels of things. They talk about pretty much what happened on Earth, and that's it. And so I don't know if they had permission to do that or not. But I would imagine they would not have, I kind of doubt that they could have got the permission to do that. It's what, legally. They became immortal. They became aware, it became the Holy Trinity. She became aware of him as a divine being, and he became aware of her as a divine being, and they both became aware of the baby as a divine being in such a way that it transformed them, and they never died anymore. And after a long time went by, and they were still around, there was no doubt about it, and everybody else was dropping by, and they kept staying on, they eventually formed a school, and the school's name was the Nacall Mystery School. And it was one of the oldest mystery schools in the world. And it was NAACAL or NAAKAL, depending on how you want to spell it. And they taught Tantra that led to immortality. They were pretty successful in this. They managed to teach about 330 or so other families. It amounted to a total of about 1,000 people, including the children, to lead them into immortality. The school was doing very well and would have probably succeeded in transforming the entire human race if it had enough time. However, about 1,000 years into the school's functioning, God changed that, and there was another shifting of the axis, and Lemuria went under. They knew long before Lemuria was going under that it was going under. These people were feminine and psychic, and they had clear signs and fully understood what was about to take place, and there was very little loss of life. Besides, it had been slowly sinking for a long time. However, at one point it did sink, and when it did, the survivors, which they had gotten all their sacred things, whatever you want to call them, artifacts or whatever, out of Lemuria long before it ever sank. They took them to various places in the world, but most of it was brought to Lake Titicaca in Peru. The golden sun disk was brought there. The survivors went in advance to primarily from Lake Titicaca in Peru all the way up the western shores of North America, South America, and all the way up to as far north as Mount Shasta. They didn't go, or if there were any, very few, went to either ends below or above that. And the two areas that most of them went to was South America, Peru, and to California. And however, the school, the Nacall Mystery School, migrated by air, according to, so they flew, and exactly how, I don't know. They flew to Atlantis at one point, and I don't know exactly when that point was, but they went here to this island here, and this is not exactly, this was not this big. This is a lousy drawing. That's what this is. I haven't really looked at this. I have it drawn on a globe over here, and this is the drawing on here is pretty accurate. It's right here. This is pretty much the size and shape of Atlantis. There were 10 primary islands. There was one huge big one that was kind of in between an island and a continent. And there was an island to the north, an island to the east, a little tiny one to the south, and 6 of them to the west, but the islands continued all into the Florida Keys, except those weren't there. They were underwater. All of this whole thing, in fact, everything all the way up over to Louisiana and this whole area up in here wasn't there. Just simply wasn't there. It was underwater. And and where they flew to, according to Thoth, was this northern island up here. And they gave it the name Udall. And when they got there, they did something kind of, I mean, if you were watching them, you would think they were probably off their rocker, kind of. They first took the island, which is, it looks kind of like that. And the first thing they did was they made a wall right down the middle, dividing the island in two. This wall was about 20 feet thick and about 40 feet high. It sealed it off. There's no way to get from one side to the other. And then they built a minor wall running this way, dividing it into 4 quadrants. What they were doing, without understanding the human brain too much, this was a person's head. That's their nose, I guess. You're looking down from the top. You have these left and right hemisphere. You have the left hemisphere over here and the right one here. And the left one is male and the right one is female. But then there's another division in there, like this. There's a front and a back aspect of this. And this front one, if you were to put this word love here, the left front aspect of the human being sees everything logically. In other words, it sees it like it is. Of course, it sees it upside down and all that stuff, but anyway, it sees it logically like this. But the right side over here inverts it like this and sees it in a mirror image, one back to the other. And this one is logical, and this one could say is not logical, but it has its logic to it. But this one also has a reflection. It goes like this. And then there is another reflection that goes like this. So this side reflects that side, and this side reflects that side. And that this one up here is based on the triangle and the square. And that's the logic. When we get into the geometries, this will make more sense. But this is the logic of the logic that's behind the male side. The female side doesn't have a logical side forward. I'll just use this as a symbol for it. She has an experiential side forward. And so the male and female seem so different in their approach to the reality, of interpreting the reality. But the male side is based on a triangle and square. The geometrical aspect is so logical, has an experiential aspect to it also. It's just that it's back, it's hidden. And the female has a logical side to her unlogical nature, which appears to man anyway, and which is not based on the triangle and the square, but is based on the, almost made a hexagon there. Is based on the pentagon. And so there is this both sides are absolutely logical if you understand what's going on. She's just as logical as he is, but based on a different kind of logic. But she's got a mirror image thing where her experiential thing is forward and his experiential thing is to the back. And by experiential, as you'll see here, and I'll try to demonstrate this even to us here, is that every single line in sacred geometry has a human experience associated with it. And so all your geometry has experience, but experience always has geometry associated with it. Even love. You would never think that love is geometrical, but it is. Our scientists have already established this, beyond any doubt. It's way back in there later, but later you'll see this. I'll show you the geometries of it. But there was a man, one of the first persons that I know of was Dan Winter out of New York, Eden, New York, who was doing the research of someone else, actually, I believe. And he was putting people on biofeedback systems onto monitors so they can see what was happening in a sine wave pattern, and discovered that that's in there. Yeah, no, I don't need it though. Discovered that there were people, that there were a very specific sine wave signature associated specifically with every emotional response. And so that they could get to the place where they could have people in other rooms just looking at the screen and just looking at the sine wave signatures and can tell you just what that person's feeling. But by studying the sacred geometry around the sine wave signatures can be reduced to angles, and all angles can then further be reduced to geometrical patterns. Or the other way around. You can take geometrical patterns or shapes and find out their angles and reduce them into sine wave signatures. People like Michael Helios is one who's real good at that, converting shape into sound. And so what Dan found out is that there is a direct relationship between emotions and sine wave signatures, and then through work discovered that there were very specific shapes associated with that, and then through deeper work discovered that there was very specific geometrical pattern behind all emotion, that there was one pattern that tied them all together. And that pattern, we'll see a little bit later what that was. And then there was another person called Klein's, right? Well, I've got an article out of a Wall Street Journal here, where he also has totally on his own, in another direction, come up with the same thing, that emotions have shape associated with them. And so it seems so weird to say this, and you're like, love has shape? I mean, except when you see it walking down the beach, maybe you see it. but you don't think of it as angles and cubes and squares. But it does. I'll be able to go into that deeper when we get to that level of geometry. We're still, this whole day is this introduction. That's all it is. So they were basing this island in Atlantis on this, according to Thoth, on the basic equality. So what they did is they got about half of the immortals from Lemuria got on one side and half got on the other side. Half became the feminine psychic aspect and the other side became the logical male thinkers. And then they made a reflective quality with each other and got on the other sides of the wall so they could mirror each other. And so there's this mirror quality. And they begin to function very much like our brain functions. And they did that for a period of time. I don't know how long it was, but it was a while. It wasn't something they did overnight. It was several hundred years they did this. And then finally one day they, I guess, felt they were ready. And then on the main island, they laid out the tree of life. They did this. Is this right? No, that's not right. There's another one somewhere. It's not in here. Where? Here? Here? Yeah. In there? Okay, it's something like that. We all know what it is. They laid out the tree of life on there. They did it with their thoughts and their emotions, and they created a standing wave pattern on the surface, the geographical surface of Atlantis, according to Thoth. And they kept this pattern going, and they did something that I don't know what he means by it. He says they breathed life into it. I don't know exactly what that means. I couldn't understand what it meant, but they made it a living form. And he said it began to create these vortex energies that rotated out of each one of these places. And that there were 8 of these places that were, well, let's put it another way. The survivors from Lemuria were then called forth to come, and they all, in their own place, and they just knew that they were supposed to go, and they began to migrate across the country over toward Atlantis, and they made their way toward there. However, remember, they were equivalent to about a 12-year-old girl. They were immature. They had not completed themselves, and there were certain areas of experience, of human experience, that they had not completed. And they had only completed 8 of the 10 areas. Now, again, I don't really know what that means either. But there were 2 areas in here somewhere that they had not completed. And so when they were pulled to Atlantis and they were brought here, they were pulled to these spots. These spots, by the way, he said, this pattern was laid out on the surface to the accuracy of a single atom. So we're talking about an extremely accurate pattern. And these cities were placed on these exact spots. There were eventually 10 cities, 10 major cities in Atlantis. And but the survivors from Lemuria went to 8 of these places. There were 2 places that were completely vacant. It was just nobody's nature yet. Nobody had developed into that nature. And then, and what life does, I mean, I don't know if these guys thought about this far enough along the line when they were doing this, but what happens with life is you leave a space open and life fills it. It's just automatic. What I like to use is like the freeway. You know, when you're on the freeway and you let the car in front of you get a little bit too far ahead of you, fills right in. It's the same kind of thing. They had a couple spaces open, and life filled them in. The first one, the one that came in first, was from extraterrestrial. I don't know where it was from, and he never really clearly made this clear, but they were not a problem when they came in. And they got permission. They asked permission to come in. So there was nothing illegal or anything else like that. But this was the Hebrews. According to Thoth, they came from somewhere else. They had failed. They did not make it to the next level and had to repeat it. It's like a child going to school over again in another grade. They had to repeat it over. They were extremely advanced race relative to us because they had been through a lot of things that we were about to go through. And so when they came in, they brought in a great deal of information that we didn't even know about yet or anything. And there was no real problem with them. And if it had not been for the next one, I don't think there would even be a problem today. It would have been probably a very clean integration. However, the last one, the 10th one that came in, was a real problem, and is a problem from the moment they came in, the very moment that they came in, to this very moment right now. And the struggle has still been going on. And it sounds funny where they came from. Again, realize I said this on tape 7.5 years ago. When I first started saying it, it sounded even weird to me, but I had to repeat what he told me. And I had no kind of external evidence to support this in any way at all. But he said that they came from Mars. And that and it wasn't from Mars of today, or even close to today, but it's from Mars from a long, long time ago, approximately just under 1 million years ago. And what was going on about 1 million years ago, which we're going to get into detail. Scientists now are suspecting, are giving a date of about, they're giving dates on this at about 500,000 years ago, but eventually they're going to get back there, I know, because Thoth has never been wrong in anything, and I've really tried to find him wrong on something. I've really, everything he's ever told me that I could check, I've tried to check, and even obscure details, he's been right on. And anyway, he said it's just under 1 million years. He said that Mars was a beautiful planet, that there was waters and oceans and trees, and it was a lot like Earth. He said it was a beautiful place. And there was a race of beings that was on that planet that was warring amongst themselves, constantly warring amongst themselves. According to Thoth, there has been 4 times in the creation of this universe when life has decided to rebel against the system, you might say. And this was the 3rd time that it had taken place. And I don't know when it started, but it ended approximately 1 million years ago. And the Martians began. They knew that it was all over with. At one point, they knew that they were going to destroy each other. Just as our governments know right now that it's pretty much over with here, too. And a few more years down the line, there won't be any doubt. And they knew that it was over with, and a small group of them began to try to find a way to escape, just like our governments are also doing the same thing right now. And they went to, there was experiments that were done really all over Mars, but the primary place was in Cydonia, which we will discuss later and go into great detail on that. And they built these huge pyramidal structures there that were tetrahedral in shape, octahedral, 5-sided, and these were immense, immense structures that you can't imagine on present-day Earth terms. Imagine a building being 10 miles high, but that's fact. The D&M pyramid on Cydonia is 50,000 feet plus high. That it was over with, and a small group of them began to try to find a way to escape, just like our governments are also doing the same thing right now. And they went to, there was experiments that were done really all over Mars, but the primary place was in Cydonia, which we will discuss later and go into great detail on that. And they built these huge pyramidal structures there that were tetrahedral in shape, octahedral, 5-sided, and these were immense, immense structures that you can't imagine on present-day Earth terms. Imagine a building being 10 miles high, but that's fact. The D&M pyramid on Cydonia is 50,000 feet plus high. And we don't even have mountains that high here. And but that's NASA determined, that they're the one that determined that's how high this is. And these are all structures, as you'll see later, that describe mathematically one thing, and that is a star tetrahedron inscribed in a sphere, which is the basis of the Merkaba that we're going to talk about in here. And again, I will make that very clear and describe that work in a little while. And what they were doing was they were creating a Merkaba, but they were recreating an external Merkaba, not a living field based on your thoughts and your emotions that we're going to discuss, but an external Merkaba, which we call a UFO, or a spaceship, or a craft. And but what is a Merkaba? It's more than just a vehicle that you get in and fly around. It is a vehicle that can pass through the dimensional levels. It can go through space as well as time. Because time is a function of size and the golden mean spiral. And when all these things are put together, you can move back and forth in time and space, and time is really spherical. And so the Martians started looking around in their Merkabas and discovered that there was this planet called what we call Earth that was in their way into their future, 1 million years or so into their future, and about 65 or 70,000 years into our past, which was when Atlantis first started. And they decided, which was very much like where they were, and they, in a small group, it wasn't millions of people, it was somewhere between a couple thousand, and the absolute maximum that a group Merkaba, a single group Merkaba can create is about 150,000. So it would be somewhere between those figures. I don't know what it was, but I think it was much smaller. I think it was only really from what Thoth was trying to project out. It was a few thousand people were projected off of the surface of Mars a million years ago, projected into the future, into our past, and into this 10th place here, without permission. Probably Lucifer Rebellion, they don't need permission, they just do it. And it wasn't Lucifer, though, it was someone else before them. And they just did it. And so we were, by this time, approximately equal to maybe a 13 or 14-year-old girl. We were like a young girl. And the Martians coming in were like maybe a 70-year-old man. And no permission, they just came in and merged with us. It was rape. They didn't ask. Nothing, just said, we're here. Like it or not, that's the way it goes. And they immediately tried to take us over and tried to subdue the Earth, and a war ensued almost immediately. However, there were too many of us. I say us and them, but for me it's all the same. From now I'm an Earthling. And there were too many of us, and there was not very many of them, and finally it was decided from their side that they would stop fighting and trying to control things. And it was decided from their side that they would attempt to try to understand what this female thing was, whatever this female thing was, because they had no understanding of it at all. Because like the Greys, they had developed their intellectual side to the nth degree and had no emotional body whatsoever. They didn't know what love was or compassion or any of these kinds of feelings, either negative or positive. They had no emotional structure within them at all. And so it was pure logic that they would stop trying the war because they knew they couldn't possibly win, and try to see if they could survive this by understanding what this was all about. And so from that time until, though they kept themselves very separate from the rest of the Earth, they did not try to mingle too much, though I'm sure that there were marriages and stuff like that, but it was not, they tried to keep it as, they had their own area where they stayed, and they kept them themselves a great deal. And then everything went along pretty good. For thousands and thousands and thousands of years went by, and we kept developing, we kept getting older and growing up and getting stronger. Only because of their influence, because of their sophisticated logical science with crystals that they had developed, they influenced the science and the technology of of Atlantis dramatically, to the point that in time their influence became overwhelming, and we changed sex. We went from female to male. And by the time Lemuria was over, we were a very male race, where we had been becoming very female. We quit using this side, and we started relying on the opposite side of our brain. And And then let's see. Forgot where I was exactly.
Switched from female to male.
Okay. Trying to think what the next thing that occurred after that. Oh, yeah, you guys know this better than I do. That's what I have this for. I should hold this thing. It's all programmed in here, and the way I hold this, I don't have to think. I can just do it. I'm going to hold this for a while. It kept going. Everything went fine until about 16,000 years ago, which is an unusual place in the orbit, the precession of the equinoxes for this to do this. But approximately 16,000 years ago, this thing occurred on Earth where here's the closest place to the center of the galaxy, and here's where we are now. And if we go back one cycle right back to where we are exactly right now, first of all, that's really when it began. Exactly, right to the very spot where we are right now. The poles made a minor adjustment, which our science knows definitely occurred. We've got that one tracked down. Definitely happened. And when it did, a small piece of Atlantis went into the ocean. There wasn't a whole lot of it, but it was enough of it to cause fear to go through Atlantis. And the fear lasted, according to Thoth, for about 200 years. They were afraid they were going to lose their everything again, and there was a great deal of fear. But slowly that fear went away as time went on, and they knew that they were getting further and further away from that place and moving back into the light. And it slowly started going away, and everybody started to relax, and the old evolutionary cycle just went on business as usual until approximately right here, which was about, don't hold me to my figures exactly, I mean, I'm within a little bit, give me a little bit of leeway here, approximately 16,000 years ago, right about there in the cycle right there, this event occurred where either an asteroid or a comet was heading right toward Earth. And the Lemurian aspect of ourselves wanted to just allow it to hit the Earth. That's the feminine nature, is, the Taoist approach, just allow, it's okay, it's God. It's all natural, it's nature. But the Martian aspect of ourselves said, no way. Let's blow this baby out of the sky. And they had the ability to do it. Let's just blow it up. And they argued over this and argued over this, and finally the Lemurian aspect won. And that's exactly what they did. They just allowed it to take place. And this thing came streaking in and slammed and just missed Atlantis. It would have been a total devastation. It just missed it and hit right offshore, not too far, into a place that's now above ground, which is called Charleston, South Carolina, right now. That was the dead center impact of a very huge piece of matter that hit the Earth, from which that still spread out over 4 states. And you can read about it. It's all there. And this caused a big piece, a pretty good-sized chunk of Atlantis to go into the ocean, which almost destroyed a great deal of the Martian aspect of Atlantis. And to say the very least, they were pissed off. And they said, that's it. never, ever, 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 ever again will we follow this feminine way. We are going to control ourselves from now on. We are going to do what we think is best for